Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to Truth on the Tracks. I'm Brandon Turbeville, your host. Tonight, we've got a special treat for you. We're going to talk to a number of guests. I should mention that my original plan was to have 3 guests on tonight, but in the true spirit of my tradition of managing my time poorly, I was unable to get all of them on the same show because I wasn't able to give them all equal time. It's entirely my fault. I wasn't in control of the time, so one of our guests is going to be on next week. My apologies for that. It was a great concept, I should say, because my goal was to have 3 North Carolina activists on, or activists or groups of activists on the same show to talk about the same 2 issues, which is the issue of the vaccine mandate bill that has been going through in North Carolina, and of course the issue of toll roads on I-77. Now, before we talk more about that, I mentioned that the guests were going to be Nicole Revels of the Transparency and Accountability Project in North Carolina, which is tapnc.org, tapnc.org, and NicoleRevels.com, NicoleRevels.com. My other guest, second guest, were going to be Lisa and AJ Jillani, who are the members and founders, presidents, and media director of PAVE, which is People Advocating Vaccine Education, which is a North Carolina-based organization that advocates for parental and individual choice when it comes to health, specifically in the areas of vaccination. Their website is vaccineeducation.org, and they've been active since 1996. My third guest was going to be Chuck Suitor, who is the founder of ConstitutionalWar.org. He's a grassroots organization or organizer and activist. He's a videographer and community activist, and he's been very active in North Carolina. There, he works in regards to protecting civil liberties, personal liberties, gun rights, fighting Obamacare, Common Core, toll roads, vaccination laws, all that kind of stuff. He's in Charlotte, North Carolina as well. His website's constitutionalwar.org. Now, we'll get to 2 guests, and next week we'll have, or the next show, we're going to work it out where we're going to get everybody some airtime, and maybe this will be a lesson to me to manage my time better. So the regular listeners to this show will know my tradition of setting out a tall order for myself at the beginning of the show and then not being able to match up at the end with the appropriate amount of time I need to cover an issue. Sometimes an hour is just not enough to do this stuff. Now, for those of you who are interested in following my work, of course, the radio show, Truth on the Tracks, can be found here every Monday night at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time here at ucy.tv. And the show is being rebroadcast every night of the week. So Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, of course, is still at 9 p.m., but also at 1 a.m. on most of those nights, and again at 5 p.m. on Saturdays over here at ucy.tv, and of course being rebroadcast on Reality Bites Radio as well. So again, the show has grown, and I want to thank everybody for being a part of that. Now, if you're interested in following my work, the written work, then I would encourage you to go to activistpost.com, where I post most of my articles. There's also naturalblaze.com. But most importantly, if you're interested in my work specifically, then please go to brandonturbeville.com, and that is the website where I repost all of my articles, all the YouTube videos, all the archives, all of the interviews, all the relevant information is there. The books tab is there as well. And, of course, you can purchase those books from the bookstore. So brandonturbeville.com is where you want to be for that. Now, some of you may remember the article I did regarding Jeff Tart, the North Carolina senator, and that was mainly a hit piece on Jeff Tart. But the issue at hand that we're going to talk about tonight with our guest, and we're going to continue this discussion in the next show, is the question of the attempt by the North Carolina Senate to remove the religious exemption from the from the North Carolina statute system, right? They want to eliminate the religious exemption for vaccination and apply that to not only public school students and private school students, but also to homeschool students. So this essentially means all children would be forced to be vaccinated. A secondary issue that we're going to talk about, well, maybe not secondary for some people, but this issue of toll roads in North Carolina. The attempt to put pay tolls up on Interstate 77, very busy highway, very busy interstate there. It's going to cost North Carolinians a lot of money, and it's a really, really bad deal for North Carolinians. And the people that we're going to talk to tonight and in the next show are people who are active at their community level, at their state level, and at the federal level. But it shows how they are engaging in a fight on many different levels on one level, right? So they're fighting on many different levels on one level, and they're active. That being the point, that being the operative point, is that they are active in their crusade of what they're doing, right? They're fighting the propaganda war, the information war. They're trying to reach out to their friends and neighbors. They're also dealing with the state Senate, state house. They're also doing whatever they can, right, in general. So this is what we need more and more people to do. And if you're in the North Carolina area, then I want you to please listen up and listen up good and contact these people after you hear them talking and see how you can help them. Doesn't mean you're going to agree with them on everything. Nobody agrees with anybody on everything. But if you've got a mutual interest, if you've got a mutual concern, then you have enough reason and enough justification to work together to that end. Doesn't matter what political pedigree you are. If you're opposing the removal of parental and individual choice when it comes to vaccination, then you need to hook up with these individuals and work with them. Even if you're out of North Carolina, if you're opposing toll roads, then you need to work with these individuals. Find them, do what you can to contribute, to help, to do whatever you can to make positive changes in the world. So we're going to go to our guests, and you'll hear as I talk to them. I mentioned that I have 3 guests tonight. I don't, because I mismanaged my time. Again, I apologize, but we've got it'll just make for 2 weeks of good radio as opposed to just one. So enjoy the interviews tonight, ladies and gentlemen. Truth on the Tracks, Monday night and Friday night, 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, UCY.TV, BrandonTurbeville.com. Enjoy the rest of the show. All right, so my first guest is Nicole Revels. Nicole Revels is a journalist and documentary filmmaker. She has written for alternative media outlets, including The Daily Caller and Ben Swann's Truth in Media Project, and she's a regular contributor at Pundit House, which is a North Carolina publication. She's focused on matters of government overreach affecting residents of her state, North Carolina. She's currently the executive director of TAP North Carolina, which is Transparency and Accountability Project of North Carolina, a nonprofit organization focused on education and advocacy on the state level. Her websites are tapnc.org, that's tapnc.org, and NicoleRevels.com, that's NicoleRevels.com, NicoleRevels.com. Nicole, welcome to the show.
Well, thanks for having me. Thank you for that introduction.
Well, tell us a little bit. I mean, I wanted to talk about 2 issues with you, but the first issue, of course, is the vaccine bill, and some of my listeners are going to be familiar with this because I talked about it on the show, and I've done an article about it when you confronted the North Carolina Senator Jeff Tart on this vaccine bill. I understand that the bill has been dropped, the bill that you interviewed him on or confronted him on, but just for background, could you tell the audience first what this bill was, what did it contain, and sort of why you opposed it to begin with?
Sure. Well, this bill is Senate Bill 346 in the North Carolina State Senate, and at the time it kind of seemed like it came out of nowhere, but there was kind of a cropping up of these vaccine mandate legislation pieces all across the country, it seemed like. And so Senator Jeff Tart held a press conference and announced on a Thursday that he would be introducing this legislation. And what this bill would do is, in North Carolina, we have technically vaccinations are mandated for children in the school system, but we have a religious exemption, so anybody, based on their religious beliefs can opt out of that. However, North Carolina still has one of the highest rates of vaccinations in the country for school children. And so it's not really been an issue. So when he introduced this bill, which would have removed the religious exemption from parents, it would have expanded that to not only children entering the public school system, but also to homeschoolers, as well as the university school system here in North Carolina. And it would have created a huge expansion of the vaccine schedule. I believe it entailed something like 80 different vaccines. And it would have also put into place, going forward, that the vaccines that were mandated are any that are suggested by the CDC. So that was a pretty egregious personal liberty intrusion, because with the CDC, I mean, we never know what suggestions they might make down the road. We certainly don't want to solidify into our statutes that the residents of North Carolina would be mandated to a simple federal suggestion on what we inject into our bodies. And so with being that this is going to impact homeschoolers particularly, and I am a homeschooler, the homeschool networks were some of the first ones to be informed. We're already connected with each other across North Carolina, so there was a huge uproar, massive opposition of moms who kind of charged the state legislature seeking answers from the bill sponsor, Jeff Tart, and there were a couple of other sponsors, Tamara Berenger and Terry Van Dyne. But particularly Tart was the most outspoken spokesperson on this, and so we went down there to try and figure out what exactly was happening here.
Yeah, and just to point out that not only I think a lot of people are for instance with the California bill, their reaction as well, if they pass this vaccine mandated schedule or remove the religious objection in California, then I'll just homeschool my kids. And I really think that's a bad attitude to take. But if you just say I'll just homeschool my kids in North Carolina, that wouldn't have been an option. And if you're talking about children who are in public schools, children who are in private schools, and children who are homeschooled, you're essentially talking about all children, right? So it's
exactly. And also, with the religious objection, the reason that they were going to remove this is because it was stated that people were, it entailed too much leeway for individuals to invoke it just if they had personal objections. And we, like I already said, we have one of the highest vaccination rates in the country, so it's not even something that should be an issue here. But Senator Tart at the time had made statements to the effect of that the only religions which have taken a formal stance of opposition to vaccines are Christian Scientists and the Taliban. And so that was another thing that was kind of offensive to us, because we're like, are you trying to, lump us into that category? And actually, the Christian Scientists came out with a rebuttal to that and said, we haven't taken any formal stance. And so he was kind of saying that only, the Taliban would be in opposition to his bill. But in actuality, even if the religious affiliation that you belong to doesn't have a formal stance on vaccines, there are plenty of personal religious objections. I know some Catholics were opposed to this bill because they did not want the MMR vaccine, which originates from aborted fetal cells. And so that was a religious objection of theirs personally, even if their church has not prohibited them from getting the vaccine. So it's a big issue of both parental choice and also, religious freedom.
Yeah, and this is an issue that's not necessarily about whether vaccines are safe or effective, or whether they work or they don't, or they're dangerous. So this is a question of rights. This is a question of, do you want the state to be able to force you to inject your child with a vaccine. It's a very slippery slope. I mean, you kind of, in a way, you've kind of reached the bottom of the slope to begin with once you allow it to do it with vaccines. But this is a question of rights, not a question of science.
Absolutely, and I know individuals who opposed this legislation because even though they personally had their children vaccinated, they would space them out because they didn't want all of them at one time. And this bill would have prevented parents as well from delaying certain vaccines or choosing their own schedule.
Well, let's talk a little bit about Jeff Tart in general, because you said he was the main sponsor of the bill, right?
He was the main sponsor, and when I went to his office, I was caught a little bit off guard, as you saw in the video, because as soon as I went to interview him about the bill, and he was, by the way, in his office with a group of people who were there to talk about this issue because it was the number one thing on everybody's minds that day. And so when I entered immediately, and he knew, he recognized me, but he immediately told me to leave, and he ended up calling the sergeant at arms to ensure that I would leave his office because it seemed like he just didn't want to have a conversation on record about the issue. But to give you a little bit of background of what happened there, because a lot of people have asked me if I had any previous relations with him or anything.
That was going to be my next question, was what had you done to this guy before?
So I have no personal relationship with Jeff Tart. The only time prior to that I had even had any contact with him was I was doing some research about the issue of this public-private partnership toll road that the legislators were bringing to North Carolina, and Senator Tart was considered one of the proponents of that plan, and it was very much impacting his area. And so I had called his office and asked if I could sit down with him for a scheduled interview about it, just to receive some information. And I received a call back from his campaign consultant, and I was told that would not be happening, that was just out of the question. And so a few weeks later, I saw him at a public event, and I happened to be filming. And so I used that opportunity to just talk to him myself. He sat down with me for about 20 minutes, and we spoke about the toll road issue. And so that was the only time prior to that I'd ever met him. But the thing was, when that video was released, and I do very minimal editing, so it was mostly just a streamline of our conversation with no cuts, with the exception of some added content for background information. But his constituents were very upset with some of the things that he had said in that interview, and they felt like he was being very evasive and that he had maybe told some things that weren't true. And so my feeling is that it is likely that he did not want to have another conversation with me on camera because of the backlash from that. But what's interesting is that after the vaccine ordeal in his office over that bill, SB 346, several people, it drew a lot more attention around him, actually. So I think it had, a negative impact from what he wanted. But he made a public, almost like a press release, because so many people were asking him why he kicked me out of his office like that, and stated that I was one of only 2 people ever in his entire life that had lost the privilege of meeting with him, and he named me by name and said that it was for personal reasons that he didn't want to go into. So it's kind of created a lot of, questions around that. So just to be clear, those were the only interactions that I had ever had with him prior to that happening.
Well, you obviously made quite a first impression because the second time he was not happy with you being there. I wonder who the second person who lost the interview opportunities were, because I have a feeling that that's going to be my third guest on the show tonight.
Well, I might have a guess about that because about a week prior to, I don't know if it was a week, maybe a few days prior, there was another situation in which he was having a public meeting at a coffee shop, and someone came in with a camera, and he asked them to leave as well. So,
what are the odds that I'm going to have both of these people on the show tonight? Chuck Suitor is going to be on a little later, and he's going to talk about his issues with Jeff Tart, and actually the same bill, the same vaccine bill, and the toll issue. Now, just to stay on the vaccine issue right now, I want to know that this bill that Tart sponsored and co-sponsored, was the main sponsor of, and if anybody wants to see your interaction with him, I recommend, you've got a YouTube channel, and you can also find it in the article that I did, Senator Explodes When Questioned About His Vaccine Bill. You can just Google that or find it on my website, BrandonTurbeville.com, and you can read about the interaction. You can see the video. It speaks for itself. But this bill has been dropped, from what I understand, right?
Technically, it's still in existence. It is sitting in the Rules Committee of the Senate, but the sponsors came out and stated on April 1st, this was about, a week and a half or so after it was introduced, that they were dropping it and that they weren't going to pursue any further action on it. However, the next day, there was another bill that was introduced on the House side that would essentially bring the issue up for debate before what they call a legislative research and study committee. So the issue is still very much alive.
And so this is the new bill that's in the House is the so-called vaccine study bill. That's what people are referring to it as, and it's basically they're attempting to study the safety and effectiveness of vaccines in North Carolina.
Well, the study bill is House Bill 589, and there are a list of topics that they will cover, which includes the safety of vaccines, the necessity of vaccines, the rates of vaccination, and any potential links to autism. But the problem with a study bill is that, and I experienced this with, other issues that have come before North Carolina legislature, where a study committee, the chairs of the committee will choose the experts that come and inform the body about the topic. And so oftentimes it is very one-sided, where you wonder, is this really a study committee, or it can feel like more of a propaganda session. And a lot of times legislators, if there is not enough support around their topic, they might try to bring it to a study committee. And the purpose of a study committee is supposed to be that if legislators they don't feel well enough informed about the topic at hand, they can, have this specific committee to research it, and then upon hearing from all these experts, come up with a legislative suggestion, which is a bill. And when that bill is compiled then and passed from the study committee, it goes before the body for a vote. So whatever comes out of this study committee will be eligible for hearing during this short session of the General Assembly. And so it's something that you hope does not get passed, because if it does, it will very much prolong this having to keep up the fight against them passing these measures. And
not only that, this tends to be a trend in not just state congressional proceedings, but also federal. But the idea that they have these types of hearings and these types of committees that come in, and as you said, it seems to be more of a propaganda meeting than anything else. And then the claim is that we've already investigated this to the fullest, and the science is settled. And thus, then we have a new bill that comes out, much like the original bill that didn't pass, and it's now got a firmer foundation because the science is so-called settled.
Right, and we've spent tax dollars on these committee meetings, and legislators put so much time into learning about this issue. So it can be considered a little bit of a slap in the face if the main body does not then pass the bill that comes out of committee.
Right. Well, I want to shift gears just briefly here because you're involved in a number of issues, and the other issue is this question of toll roads in North Carolina, specifically on I-77. And I think this is your transparency and accountability project. Before we talk about the toll roads, this is involved in both the vaccine issue and the toll road issue.
The Transparency and Accountability Project is focused on education of any kind of issues that impact North Carolina residents potentially can intrude upon their lives and their liberties. And actually, we do have a video coming out this week that relates to the I-77 toll road project. And that is a former representative, Robert Brawley, speaking on the topic. It's kind of a general overview, summary of the whole, what has happened with that, because it's been sort of an ongoing thing for years that's coming to a head at this point.
So the Transparency and Accountability Project is focused on many other issues, not just these two, right? I guess the name says it all. It promotes transparency and accountability from the legislature.
Certainly. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so let's get into the toll issue. Who is behind this idea? Who is supporting the tolls? What do they use to justify the implementation of toll roads on I-77 or toll booths on I-77, and why do you oppose it?
Well, this is one of those issues that is a little bit difficult to pinpoint exactly who is behind it because of the fact that nobody wants to take credit for it because it's so unpopular. And so we know for certain that organizations like ALEC, the American Legislative Exchange Council, and corporations like Cintra, who they are the company that would be installing and managing this I-77 toll road, we know for certain that they are proponents of this plan. Now, as far as who's responsible for this having passed, the reason it's difficult to say is because there are so many steps in the process that, okay, so the legislature, for example, had to pass legislation to say that toll roads are allowed in North Carolina, basically. That legislation didn't necessarily say we're going to adopt this plan. It was just removing the barrier in our statutes. And so when legislators passed that, and a lot of the residents of North Carolina involved with the group wide977.org were there to oppose that bill, but it was just the I guess reasoning, legislators' defense for passing that was, oh well, it's still on. It's a local issue, is what they said. We're just removing barriers so locally they can make their own decisions. And then even the city council, there's an organization. It used to be called MUMPO, which is a transportation board that comprised of members from the local municipalities. It's now called CRTPO, but this organization, the members are not elected. It's a regional transportation board, basically. The members are appointed from among the local municipalities. And so if you don't like what this body determines for your road plans for your area, you don't really have anybody to hold accountable, because you can't unelect somebody the next town over who was appointed by their town. And so I suppose that would be the main entity responsible for bringing about and allowing this plan, but also the North Carolina Department of Transportation had to sign the contract to allow this, and that again would be they are appointed by the governor. So there's not a lot of accountability there for us to, we can't exactly unappoint or unelect that person. But also the treasurer's office, the North Carolina treasurer, had to sign off on this plan. She is subject to election, but it's not something that people have really taken up with her. She just more has veto authority over it. So it's something that on many different levels individuals have tried to pass the blame around.
Yeah, and you mentioned that this would be administered by Centra. I think this, this is a huge company that is, I think, one of the largest private transportation infrastructure developers in the world. It's actually a foreign corporation. It's from Spain, and it's been involved in the toll roads and the implementation of toll roads in Texas. Years ago, that was an absolute disaster and cost the Texans a lot of money too. So now I see they're moving into North Carolina. So what can people in North Carolina do? In fact, what can people who are here in the show outside of North Carolina do to help, either on the vaccine issue or the toll road issue, or both? If somebody wants to join up with you or one of your organizations, what should they do? Where should they go? Who should they contact, and how would they do it?
Well, with TAPNC, on tapnc.org, there is a sign-up to receive our action alerts and updates. You can receive those by email and contact us. We try to keep in communication with the various groups that are working on these issues as well. With the vaccine issue, my friend Lisa, with people advocating vaccine education, which is PAVE, they are heading up a lot of action alerts, and they have protests and events coming up to make sure that individuals are informed about what's happening in our legislature right now on that issue. And so they need help. If anybody wants to join them, that's PAVE. I believe it's pave.com. But now
I think it's vaccineeducation.org.
Okay, vaccineeducation.org. Thank you.
She'll be coming on. She's guest number 2. So.
Oh, great! You have all my friends.
So basically, people would need to contact you through the websites?
Sure. I mean, we're kind of out there. People can friend me on Facebook. They can come to the TAPNC page on Facebook or sign up for the alerts through our website for that. And then on the toll road issue, I know that the group WidenI77.org has, even though a lot of the North Carolina legislative bodies are claiming that this is a done deal, they do have a lawsuit pending to try and hinder the plan from going forward in the meantime. And so I know that they need help and donations, and that is WidenI77.org, and they have a lot of information resources on their website as well.
Okay, and you mentioned a social media presence. They could find you on Facebook, or your organizations on Facebook as well?
Facebook is TAPNC, and then the website. And, one of the things that you might want to look at as well with the toll roads, and this is going to be in the video that we're releasing this week, former Representative Brawley goes into this, is that it's not just an issue of building and tolling a highway, which a lot of liberty advocates look at as a good thing, privatization. This is a public-private partnership. So, North Carolina taxpayers are putting money into building this road, and then the road is basically leased out to a private corporation, and that corporation then charges North Carolina drivers to use the road. And then, as you mentioned, that corporation is Centra. They've gone bankrupt in projects in several states now, but that they're based out of Spain. So it's double taxation is the issue at hand there.
Yeah, it really is the worst of both worlds. Nicole, we're running out of time. I've got to be able to get to my other guests, and I thank you so much for coming on the show tonight. Ladies and gentlemen, my guest was Nicole Revels, Executive Director of TAPNC, Transparency and Accountability Project, North Carolina. Her websites are tapnc.org and NicoleRevels.com. Nicole, thanks so much for coming on the show tonight.
Thanks for having me. Have a good one.
You too. Thanks. All right, with my second guest tonight, Lisa and AJ Jillani of the People Advocating Vaccine Education Organization. Their website is vaccineeducation.org. Both Lisa and AJ are members of PAVE, People Advocating Vaccine Education. It's a North Carolina-based organization advocating for parental and individual choice in matters concerning their health, specifically in the areas of vaccination. PAVE has been active since 1996 and is a major contributor in the fight against medical tyranny and forced vaccination in North Carolina and the rest of the country. Now, AJ is PAVE's media director. Lisa is the founder and president of PAVE, and I want to welcome both of you to the show.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Thank you, Brandon.
So let's talk a little bit about. I just had Nicole Revels on the show to talk about the vaccine bill that was sponsored by Jeff Tart and a couple of other members of North Carolina Congressional Assembly there. Can you tell us a little bit? I mean, apparently this main vaccine bill has been dropped, abandoned, sort of, right? Not really. It has, but not really. Can you tell us a little bit about what the original bill did and sort of why you opposed it?
AJ?
Well, Brandon, the chief reason for the original bill was that it basically sought outright to eliminate all exemptions. The reason we were concerned about that is that this has become a national trend since the bogus measles epidemic from Disneyland that occurred, between December and January. We clearly thought that was kind of a pharma ploy because actually measles is at a lower rate right now than it was, this time in 2014. So I think it was a well-planned effort, a nationwide effort on the part of pharma, and the lobbyists got to some of the weaker links in the assemblies. And that's what we thought about the Senate bill that was introduced by Jeff Tart, that this bill was purely profit-motivated to strike down exemptions and parental rights and make room for about 270-plus more vaccines that are in the pipeline under development right now. All kinds of garbage that is coming in this business that is quickly becoming about a $43 billion business in the next year or two. So they're right on track, basically, buying out a few legislators and getting, these bills passed to take away your rights.
Yes, and one insidious part of the bill was that if it had passed, any CDC-recommended vaccine would have automatically been added to the schedule for North Carolina. It would not have been up for a vote or debate.
Now, this bill has apparently been dropped, or at least that's what we've heard, right, that they've dropped the bill. It's still there, I believe, correct? It's just not being pursued?
Yes, that's pretty much the status of it, is that it's dead. And what we're hearing from Tart and Terry Van Dyne in particular, those were the two key players, is that they're not going to pursue it.
Now, there is another bill that is, sort of finding its way around the assembly halls, right? And this what they call the vaccine study bill. And you guys had a press release about that recently. It's up at naturalblaze.com, and I would assume at your website. But tell us a little bit about this study bill and why we should be concerned about that.
AJ, you can go ahead.
Well, Brandon, the study bill we thought was even a more deadly product because we kind of dispatched the Senate bill folks within a 10-day period until the Senate president basically, in an unusual move, declared it dead because of the amount of reaction from the community. So we were kind of happy about that, but this all happened on April Fool's Day, so I think they kind of pulled a fast one on us because on April 2nd, just 12 hours after, this second bill called HB 589 was introduced, which basically proposed to study, amongst other things, if exemptions should be kept or denied or whatever. They want a research team and experts to debate this issue. I mean, there are some elements to it that I think people would say, well, these are all really well meant, like study autism and vaccines and things like that, but we know the story about that. I mean, there's been controversy about the amount of lying that's being done at the pharmaceutical level in research and then at the CDC level, because the liability for telling the truth for things like autism and vaccines is so large globally that will never come forward. An admission will never come forward, basically. So, they have manipulated the media. They have eliminated all research, negative research on vaccinations, by completely blacklisting doctors who even suggest such research. Slowly, I think the doors are being shut on any truth in this business at all, because in the interest of just blind, vulgar profiteering. So this is where this stands right now. If you let the vaccine industry take away your exemptions, then 270 vaccines are waiting. And as soon as ex-employees of drug companies who now work for the FDA or the Institute of Medicine, as soon as they approve these vaccines for normal use in vaccine schedules, you're in big trouble. You're going to have to get Ebola. You're going to have everything that they tell you to get, whatever is manufactured. And this is the problem we are having. This is not about chicken pox today. It may be about Ebola tomorrow.
And anthrax.
Yeah, anthrax. I mean, whatever they decide, the threat level is up because of, ABC, and they can force a vaccine on you because the laws have been struck down. Those laws have to stay in place so parents continue to retain the right and adults continue to retain the right to stay away from these vaccines, stay away from these products getting into their systems. And government intervention, I think very obvious things that Lisa could probably address, what our basic rights are in this situation from the point of view of being human beings who have a right to, what goes into their body.
Yeah, it seems to me this is the most fundamental right, because, this is the most sacred space that you have, and sovereign space that you have is your own body. And as a parent, you should have the power to make those decisions for your children. We mentioned the anthrax vaccine. I think a lot of Gulf War veterans might have something to say about that, because when they were forced to take the anthrax vaccine, it didn't work out well for a lot of them, and they have suffered a lot of side effects from that as well. So, I mean, really all of this boils down, and I said this earlier, it boils down to a question of rights. It's not a question of science. It's not really a question of whether vaccines are safe or effective or dangerous or whatever. It's a question of, do you have the right to decide to be, to decide to vaccinate or decide not to? And to me, it seems to be a very basic right and a very simple question with a simple answer.
Brendan, a point I want to make here is that there was no science behind vaccines from, the day that Jenner, decided to manufacture the smallpox vaccine. That was cowpox. It was the pus off the udders of infected cows. And from that point on, I think the propaganda machine did a lot more than science did in getting everything pulled together. Now, the polio vaccine was contaminated with the cells of rhesus monkeys and African green monkeys because the vaccine was basically developed and cultured on the kidney and testicle cells of these monkeys. Later they found out that these were highly contaminated and retroviruses were getting into the vaccines. So the oral polio vaccine, the sugar cube that we received, 2 generations of us received, caused all kinds of cancers because, SV40 and some very potent cancers are inside those products because they're monkey cancers. So the cancer industry started booming because of that. Then along came the wholesale pertussis vaccine in the 80s, which I think caused all kinds of trouble until the government intervened and offered protection to the drug companies by setting up a vaccine injury compensation program and a reporting system. Well, the government doesn't award much of anything to most people, but it still manages to award $3 billion plus quietly by sealing the records of the people who do end up winning anything. So I think all the way through, if you study the history of vaccinations, there is less science and more politics behind this entire business. And today it is getting worse and worse because there's so much data manipulation through computer use on how the industry delivers research to the FDA for approval. They deliver millions of pages. The FDA does not have the resources to read them. They sign off on a summary of a few pages and say, okay, we trust the drug company that this is just a real safe product. Now, more and more people are coming out who are saying that the CDC is fudging, statistics. The drug companies are fudging statistics. So we are really in a state right now where nobody wants to confess anything, but they keep phasing out vaccines in a quiet manner. I mean, they phased out the oral polio because they knew that ultimately liability would pile up because it did have monkey viruses in it. They phased out the wholesale pertussis vaccine in the 90s because they found out that there's so much liability because kids were getting encephalitis and very serious diseases and death from that vaccine. So the trick to do it right now is just phase everything out quietly or push the vaccines to the third world because they're still being used there openly right now. But just don't confess to anything. Not confessing is the key to continuing to make profits without lawsuits, with the government, of course, being complicit in this right now.
And also I'd like to add about the rotavirus vaccine that Paul Offit invented. The first one that he invented was also pulled because it had so many side effects. And now I think we're currently using the new and improved Paul Offit rotavirus vaccine.
Very true.
Yeah, and it seems, as you mentioned, that not only was the science spotty about this stuff to begin with, but even as it moves forward, it seems to get worse and worse because now we're seeing vaccinations for, the concept of vaccinations for smoking and the concept of vaccination for bacteria. When this is all supposed to be viral related, right? And now we're seeing these things that are just absurd being spread out amongst the media. So, with that, I want to ask, who and what is really behind these bills? Because it seems not only is it happening in California, not only is it happening in Vermont, now it's happening in North Carolina with the Jeff Tart bill. We've seen it in Australia where they've recently made a new policy decision to yank welfare benefits from people who don't vaccinate. Israel just mandated a policy in the same manner. So we're seeing this all over the world, and even just here in the United States, we've seen it now in 3 states, with North Carolina being one, and I feel like there may have been one other, but at least 3 states in the U.S. So who is behind these bills, or who are behind these bills, and what's really the guiding force behind these bills being submitted to Congress?
Well, I was made aware of a group, the acronym is ALEC, A-L-E-C, and we recently watched a video that this group basically, to put it simply, they talk to the legislators and basically write the bills for these legislators. They wine them and dine them and basically give them, if not verbatim the same wordage, but the different states are basically, we're seeing the same bills in several states that are, the problem that we have is that it's eliminating people's right to an exemption.
So it seems, go ahead.
One point I just wanted to make here is that, you make a very important point here, what's behind this blitz, and we discussed earlier that, by 2018 they do want to hit the $43 billion benchmark for this business, which was only a $6 billion business in the 90s. So, this is a huge business, and I think the lobbyists are now working the field. They wanted to manufacture an epidemic. They could not really come up with a nice disease that was also vaccine preventable, according to their definition. So they latched on to measles from Disneyland because, that is an all-American thing. It's Disneyland, and, kids get sick there. It's pretty serious. But they played it pretty well. I mean, since 2014, they have been kind of working the field to get the media on their side. And, we have Paul Offit in Forbes magazine basically telling medical journalists that those who interview quack sides of the vaccine business should be put in journalism jail because they don't need to be interviewing the quacks. They're just need to be interviewing the mainstream, the research and the drug companies and people like that who really are in the know on this and, who are the experts. So I think they've been working this for a while. I mean, they've been waiting for an epidemic. After 9/11, the Bush administration tried to plug the smallpox vaccine. I mean, they tried to, bring the paranoia in. The Homeland Security bill had some riders in it that secretly were squeezed in to never be able to sue a vaccine manufacturer for any kind of liability. Those riders were, mysteriously discovered long after. But none of that really took. I mean, the smallpox vaccine, the response was dismal, even though these were vaccines that in the 70s were being given to our infants. At the point where 9/11 happened, even doctors and first-line workers and people, GIs out in the field even refused it because they said it was way, way too dangerous. It causes progressive vaccinia, which is potentially fatal when you scratch the smallpox scar and touch another part of your body. It will basically cause a rash that eats up your entire body, which was, commonly happening all over the world while smallpox vaccination was being given, because these were the same stocks that were thawed out for 9/11 after this incident happened. So, that failed. Anthrax failed because even Lisa got plenty of calls after 9/11 from GIs who were trying to get out of the anthrax vaccination because they were seeing their very strong, Marines get crippled by the anthrax vaccination. I mean, extremely fit people. So, the opportunity, they've been waiting for a long time, and, the real epidemic never came. So they came up with the Disneyland epidemic and kind of made a go of it, and that's why you see this as a national trend right now, that it is happening all over.
Yeah, and I've done some research on some of these measles epidemics, and things like whooping cough, for instance. They did a big report. Foreign Policy came out a report of all the outbreaks of whooping cough in these different areas, and you look at this scary graphic, and it's got little green dots all over the map to the point that it looks like the whole map is covered with little green dots. And then you zoom in on the green dots, and you find out that some of these green dots are just one child who contracted whooping cough, and that's not an outbreak. One person who contracted what that is one person who contracted whooping cough. But it's heavy propaganda. And guys, I'm sorry we're actually out of time. I'm going to have you back on because this has been a fascinating discussion. We're going to have to go into this a little deeper. But briefly, and just in closing, tell people what they can do. What can people in North Carolina do to help you guys? What can people outside of North Carolina do to help you guys and connect with you? If somebody wants to join up with you or your organization, what should they do? Where should they go? Who should they contact? And how should they contact them?
Well, the best way to get a hold of us is through our website, which, as you said, is vaccineeducation.org. We also have vaccineeducation.com, and my email address is on there. We also have a Facebook page, and I can give anyone who's interested that information if they just email me. And right now we're currently keeping incredibly close tabs on Beverly Earl's House Bill 589 to make sure it does not go into the end of session bill.
And if I can just ask one other question here, can you tell us a little more about, actually I've read the time wrong, we got a couple more minutes, but could you tell us what initiated the creation of your organization? You go back as far as 1996. What got you guys started?
Well, people are often surprised to learn that it's not the fact that our first daughter was vaccine injured, but during the birth of my second daughter, we had chosen not to vaccinate her, and at that time it was the advent of the hepatitis B birth dose that your child gets within 24 hours. And when we declined that, the pediatrician reported us to social services. And so that was basically a very traumatic time for me, and really, quite honestly ruined my birth experience with my child because I was reported to social services. But I did not want other mothers to have to go through that sort of experience. So I actually formed PAVE as sort of a resource for moms where PAVE members could volunteer to go and just hang out at the hospital and be a source of comfort for any mom who was being harassed. But eventually it just turned into a source for education primarily.
Well, vaccines, such a great scientific health invention that you need the police, state, and CPS to enforce it.
Yeah. So great they have to be mandated.
Exactly. Well, guys, thanks so much for coming on the show tonight. Your website, your website is vaccineeducation.org. This is Lisa and AJ Jillani of People Advocating Vaccine Education, North Carolina-based organization. Guys, thanks again for coming on the show tonight.
Thank you so much.
Brandon, thank you. Pleasure.
Ladies and gentlemen, this has been Truth on the Tracks. I'm Brandon Turbeville. We'll see you next week.
For more news, visit pigmynews.com.